Hello and welcome to this week's 1829 talk. You're very welcome. I am Professor Annie Tindley and it's my honour to be one of the trustees of the Natural History Society of Northumbria and to be introducing these 1829 series of talks to you. The 1829 talks highlight and celebrate the year of our foundation as a society, as one of the oldest and most honourable natural history societies in Britain. And the purpose of these talks is to allow a platform and showcase for the most exciting and cutting edge new research being undertaken by our early career researchers. So they're here really to share with us the latest findings in environmental research. As such, I hope you enjoy this week's talk. And I could urge you, if you can, to follow us on social media, Natural History Society of Northumbria, and enjoy the talk.
Okay, so welcome to tonight's talk. Tonight you've got the pleasure of Thomas and I giving a talk on the Dorset Nightjar project, and we're specifically going to be focusing tonight on the urban nightjars that we are effectively working on and working with, and we're going to be comparing these sort of ecologically niche islands within an urban area to Gosforth Nature Reserve up in Newcastle, near where you guys are based, to try and show some of the similarities and differences between the sites, as well as delving deeper into the Nightjar project itself. So Thomas and I have been on the, I've been on the project for 2 years, and Thomas has been on the project for 3 years. And we're both currently studying at Bournemouth University, so we're both university students. So let's begin.
So we are comparing two sites. As you can see on the left, we've got Gosforth Nature Reserve. And unfortunately, me and Sam have never been to the area, and especially this year, it's a little bit more trickier to the extent as well that we wouldn't be able to get up to you guys. So we had to do a bit of delving in, bit of research, so apologies for any incorrections. But we found that it was a very diverse habitat range. It's got mix from freshwater all the way up to woodland. It's got bits in between. I know you guys have only ever had one nightjar, but the whole point of this presentation is more to do with the areas that are really nice and diverse, really nice, rich nature reserves, with like lots of wildlife around them, but also the pressures that they have in terms of encroaching human development, as seen on the right. So this is our area. This is Upton Heath. We're located near Poole and Bournemouth, and this is just one of the heaths that are in the Dorset area. And as you can see, it's basically a heathland in the middle of a massive urban area. We've got Broadstone, and then we've got Parkstone just to the north as well, and Corfmullen up there. And we're trying to compare the two areas and saying how these nature reserves and these really nice ecologically niche areas are sort of being affected by humans. But our example, we can sort of show you a different side to these birds. So we were looking at the imagery that we got sent, and as you can see, we got Gosforth Nature Reserve right in the middle, in the box, the red box with the little pin on, GNR, and we've got the areas that are developed within the last few years, from 2005 this was updated to. And as you can see, the areas are being developed, and we can see there's a golf course right next to the nature reserve. There's also a lot of grassy fields which potentially we've been told could be developed in the future, and this could have some serious effects on the nature reserve. So if you see the Dorset ones, this is all the Dorset heathlands. The heathlands are in green, and the sort of the grey shaded areas is quite tricky to see on some of the bits. But as you can see around the Borough Pool area and Bournemouth Borough Council area, those are particularly built up areas with very few green areas, and if they are, they're very isolated away from others. There are initiatives to try and combine all these green areas, but as you can see, especially in the Purbeck Dorset District Council area, there are a few of the heathlands, which are sort of more on their own, and they're quite isolated.
Okay, so we decided to have a look at some of the species and effectively show what these small isolated sites can actually bring to the table, because Gosforth has in its history has recorded about roughly 170, just over 170 species of bird, which is actually really quite good. You compare that to some of the sites in Dorset, and that's actually much more. I mean, Gosforth even, sorry, the highlights are things like barn owls, blue tits, cuckoos in the summer. Also pink-footed geese have been recorded and things like that. And obviously that one Nightjar record. But when you compare that to the Dorset Heathland, I mean, some of the things that we've got are some of our highlights on the heath are adders, woodlarks, sundew, keeled skimmers, silver-studded blues, just to name a few of the stunning wildlife that we have around. And obviously these are on small pockets of heathland, so it's worth saying that you can already start to see just how vital these are for wildlife. And in fact, when we were asking the Gosforth volunteers for the records from the site, one of the things they mentioned about the blue tits in particular was that a particular nest box they put up. I mean, I find this quite incredible. One of the nest boxes they put up on site, which had blue tits in residence, they were effectively evicted by a family of great tits, which is quite funny to see. But it just shows you how sort of being in these small isolated areas means there's quite a big competition for those sorts of nesting spaces.
So yeah, we're gonna focus on one of the species. It's a species that's quite close to our heart, and it is the European nightjar. And as you can see in this video, we've got one of our females that we didn't tag in the end, but we did catch and ring her, and she's got 2 little chicks that she's brooding. And this video just sort of shows that, albeit they are very elusive birds, they're very camouflaged, and you wouldn't be able to see them that easily unless you know where they're roosting, or if you're very lucky to have put tags and rings on, which we have been in our project. And we just wanted to show you how these guys are almost becoming street nightjars. So you think of them as being a heathland species. They feed on primarily moths and insects at night, and roost on the heaths in the daytime. But we want to show you how they're adapting to this more urban life and how they are becoming almost street nightjars.
Okay, so this next bit is going to take quite some doing, and hopefully I should be able to show you what a nightjar sounds like. Okay, so we're going to tell you a little bit about how these nightjars, effectively a little bit about the nightjars. So each nightjar, so nightjars do something called churring, so that's instead of effectively their song. And each nightjar has an individual chur, which is unique to that one nightjar. So the easiest way to try and show you how to do this, or how to differentiate between them, is to use the Neville and Norman technique. Now, the Neville and Norman technique is a really well-known technique, and effectively, well, let's have a listen to Neville first, and let's see if this works. Tried and tested. So that was Neville, and so now let's have a listen to Norman very quickly. So you'll notice that there is a difference between the two of them, although it's quite subtle. But when you break it down into sonograms like you see on screen, if you have a look at where my mouse is, you'll see that the 2 sonograms are actually very different. So in the same time frame, Neville has 3 large bits and 2 small bits, to Norman's 4 large bits effectively and 3 small bits. So effectively, I mean, that's pretty incredible, isn't it? You can tell the difference between these birds just by listening to their song.
So when you learn their sort of almost culture and where they're roosting and where their territories are, you can almost map it out on the heathlands themselves. And as you can see, these are the heathland environments that they live in. So you'd think, oh, it's a nice, easy bird to hear. You can definitely see them and you can hear them at night. But in the daytime, they're incredibly hard to see. And they're generally tucked in under a bit of gorse or under a bit of bracken or in like a nice clear patch. And we're just got to take it back to the heathland environments themselves. One of the reasons why they are being massively encroached on is, as you can see, they're very nice and flat, very nice and dry, and also they're pretty solid. And these heathlands are all around the Bournemouth and Poole area, and as you can see, they're really nice, diverse purples and greens, lots of gorse, heather. You've got a bit of purple moorgrass in there as well, and you've got a nice range of sort of species of plants, which also host really nice for the species of wildlife. But this, to be said, is all human created. Without the disturbance, it would not be anything like this.
So moving on to the pressures that we find on our heaths. So pressures affecting the nightjars on our urban heathlands. And actually some of these pressures, with the exception of dogs, will be some of the exact same pressures that Gosforth will be facing as well. So part of the issue with being next to it, well, in an urban area, is that there is disturbance 24 hours a day, whether this is through light pollution, traffic noise, aircrafts passing overhead, or just people being on the heath 24 hours a day. Obviously, with more people around, there's more of a chance that they will be out there at, well, any time of day. Obviously, this puts pressures on the nightjars because they need to be able to find these, well, they need to be able to feed at night and find quiet places during the day to roost and nest. Walkers, again, I've just sort of explained that, but actually in Dorset, another issue we have is the fact that Dorset heathlands, one of the things that you can do, or you probably shouldn't, but for some reason it's deemed that you can do, is that you, for some reason, you can walk absolutely anywhere on most of these heaths. There is, especially in places like the New Forest, which is just slightly out of our range, that's more of an issue. Fire is another huge issue, and something that we saw a lot of this summer, especially on our study site. I mean, these heathlands are particularly dry areas anyway, so it won't take much to send them up in flames. So nightjar, well, the habitat that we work on is dry heathland. There are, of course, wet heathlands as well, but nightjars specifically prefer dry heathlands. And so that, coupled with urban areas, increased pressure, more people smoking, people having barbecues, bonfires, that sort of thing, they inevitably start fires. And it is actually illegal on Dorset heathlands to have barbecues and bonfires, but unfortunately people still do that. And if you see, I don't know if anybody saw, but the Wareham Forest fire this summer is a great example, or not exactly a great example, but an example of what can happen when these places go up in flames. And one of our study sites also did go have a fire as well. Dogs are a pressure to these birds as well. Partially because nightjars are ground nesting, as you may have seen in the clip earlier, and dogs roaming around on heathlands, well, they are supposed to be on leads during the summer, but obviously it's very difficult to police. And nightjars often nest quite close to footpaths, meaning that it doesn't take much for a dog to trample on their nest, because a dog goes, say, a metre or two, maybe even 10 metres into the heather, and that could be the nest gone. Housing is also another issue. Obviously, these places, as Thomas said before, are very flat and look like there's not a lot there. And that can often put them in the firing line for development even, and not just housing development, but for other major infrastructure projects as well.
So to sort of see how the nightjars are coping with all these pressures and human life, and almost, yeah, encroaching onto their habitat, we decided as part of the project to go out and try and catch and ring as many nightjars on, like this is Upton Heath, as we could in a season, and also fit these tiny little GPS trackers, which are about a gram, gram and a half. So it's less than 1% of the body weight. Is about exactly the same as us putting on a small watch or something. So it's quite hard to tell for the bird, and it doesn't actually harm them at all. If it rains, the tag actually falls off, and so especially this year we've had a bit of a mix of really nice dry weather, and then we've had some wet spells. In the wet spells, the tags all came off and we could collect them and find where they're going. And as you can see, these are some of the first tracks that we got earlier in the project, and you can see they're mostly sticking to the heaths that you'd expect. You just believe that nightjars live all the time on the heathland, but what we found is that they're actually moving out of the heath probably about 10, 11 o'clock in the summer when it's quite dark. And as you can see, they are becoming street nightjars. And what we term by that is that they're moving out into our urban areas and actually going to some quite interesting sites. And Sam's going to tell you a little bit about that in a sec.
So actually, just whilst we're on this slide, if you have a look at the bottom right-hand corner of the map, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but where my mouse is, there is in fact a cluster, and that cluster is shown on the right-hand side there, and that cluster is in this location. So this here is the Broadstone Way, and it's a main road. So what is a nightjar doing in a main road at night? Well, it's quite an interesting question, to be honest, and we were trying to figure it out ourselves. But we eventually came to the conclusion that this narrow belt of heathland along the left-hand side of the road here is full of hawthorn, birch and willow, and it creates quite a sheltered environment from the southwesterly prevailing winds. And also coupled with the street lights that are on the left-hand side of the road here as well, that effectively creates a huge moth trap. Well, I'm probably exaggerating a bit, but there is some evidence to show that there is probably moths going towards these street lamps. And where there's moths, there will be nightjars, because nightjars, of course, eat, well, the vast majority of their diet is moths. And so these birds are just making the most of this I guess, bountiful resource of food in an urban environment. And this road is no quiet road. This is the main road out of Poole, between Poole and Broadstone, which are two quite major, I want to call them cities, but they're towns really. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see.
So in the first year, we were really quite surprised by getting all our little off-heath adventures into the towns and into the little villages and bits and pieces. As you can see in the top left of the photo, we've got a multitude of colours. We've got reds, purples, greens, blues and yellows, and those are all the birds that were from that one heath that decided they wanted to go into town and go to these little hazel belts, like Sam was saying. They wanted to go to all the street lamps and bits and pieces. But then we got a couple of really interesting tracks back, and this one in particular, it's like a limey green colour, shows that the bird was tagged on a different heath. It was on the top right, one of the larger heaths. And when you say it went into town, it went all the way down the green corridor that combines that heath down into the middle of Bournemouth. It followed that corridor all the way down into the centre of Bournemouth. It then went to the beach, went to the pier by the looks of it. One of the points are just offshore near where the pier is, and then it decided to go probably along the beach and then cut in up. There's lots of these old chines, which they're called, where sort of like a little river or a little stream comes down. It's very vegetated. It probably followed one of those up into the nearby golf course, and you can see there's a little cluster on the golf course just north of the beach. And then it went over to Brownsea Island. That's quite famous around here for, or like the Scouts, and it's also a really nice nature reserve. It's got red squirrels on, and it went all the way back into Poole to that golf course, and then it went basically cut across inland, across these urban areas, over to that wet area, which is Holes Bay in the left-hand side of the map, and then back onto the heath. So these nightjars, we sort of just assume that they're hanging around on the heath, but this was just in one night, and it definitely went on a bit of a feeding adventure. We have seen it with other nightjars as well, so it's not something particularly that the tag has resulted them to do. Some of these birds are moving quite far in just like a very short space of time. And one thing to put into perspective is that these birds go all the way down to Congo for the winter. So one of these flights that we assume are quite large, in terms of a nightjar, it's probably something that they would do in a day if they're migrating, or they would go even further in a day. We don't really know, and that's why we wanted to tag them. That's why we wanted to see how they're responding to the urban life that is Bournemouth and Poole and the surrounding areas. So, yeah.
You know, that is quite interesting. I was just thinking about that as well, and in fact, it's really interesting to see this green line where my mouse is now is following effectively a green corridor, which is the Bourne Valley. And I mean, it shows how important these green corridors are to wildlife, and something that Gosforth is a part of is effectively a green corridor as well. So it's worth noting that similar things could be happening, maybe not with nightjars, but with other species near Gosforth. And so finally, that brings me on to one of our last points, and that is, what would a nightjar be doing at a tip? And we don't know, to be perfectly honest. We don't know why they come to this tip, but this tip is Camford Tip, and it's still an active tip. And I've said tip a lot, but effectively, this is one of the best places, arguably in Dorset, to find nightjars feeding at dusk and dawn, which is pretty incredible. In fact, the hit rate for catching nightjars up there, I say, oh God, that hit rate doesn't sound particularly great, but the catching rate of nightjars up there is ridiculous for the site. And we don't know why they're heading up here. Maybe it's a communal thing. Maybe there's some moths that feed on at the tip. Who knows? But either way, this is one of the best places in Dorset to see nightjars. And in fact, it's not just the local nightjars that go there. We know that nightjars from the local heaths go there, but we've also had ringing recoveries from other heaths as well around the country. So it's quite possible that this is an important sort of, I guess, stop on migration for migrating nightjars, with sightings as far away as Wales, which is pretty incredible.
So yeah, if you want to get in contact with us, you can tweet us. We've got our Twitter handle at the bottom, and you can also find us on Instagram. That's on the bottom right, or you could email us or just drop us any questions through the society. We've had the pleasure to chat to you tonight. If this was in different conditions, we would have been seeing you face to face, but yeah, virtual will have to do for now. Yeah, like I said, if you got any questions, feel free to get in contact. It has been a pleasure, and we hope you've learned a little bit more about sort of how species, in particular nightjars, have dealt with like an increase in the urban environment. And so yeah, in terms of Gosforth, it's been great to research, and it's like a really lovely site, and we will definitely be getting up there in the near future when we can. So yeah.
Yes, hopefully. And thank you for inviting us to speak tonight. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the talk, and hopefully we'll see you guys at some point face to face, if out and about on Gosforth, or maybe in Dorset. So see you guys soon.